learned this, in this 88 and then maybe in 90 as well too when Hogan lost it again. I think Vince started to realize that there was still value in Chase. Hogan was able to maintain as much as he did because I think once he lost the titles in 88 and then 90, he was still red hot. He doesn't need titles at this point. You can still do the same thing and try to draw other guys in the meantime, Savage, a Warrior, and Hogan can still be your top guy even up the title. Yeah. I think they took the risk here and it worked.
Well, because now I think
go ahead, Rob.
Well, you could do it here because you had Savage, but when they tried it with Warrior 90, it didn't work the same because Warrior just wasn't as good as.
Oh, it didn't work at all. No. But I would argue that Warrior. I think the Warrior not working was a shock because I would argue that as over as Savage was, in '88, can you argue that Warrior was he more over than Savage? Given the kind of image he had, the rock star kind of like.
I don't think so. No.
You don't think so? Okay.
No. Because if he was, the thing wouldn't have tanked after he won the title. If he was,
and one day we'll do a deep dive on this podcast. This is why I love doing the show because it's a retro podcast. It's discussion points about all these things. Because Savage, it never felt that when Savage was, it never felt that even when Savage was champion, he was on level with Hogan. It did feel that at times in '89, going to '90, that Warrior was on level with Hogan.
So I feel just the opposite because to me, when Savage, I feel just the opposite because you could see when Warrior was world champion that they were booking. You could tell that they were Hogan stuff was still more important.
No, of course, no. What as champion? Yeah, I'm saying leading into Mania 6. I'm saying like when it was clear that Warrior was the next guy. It's a matter of when they pull a trigger. It felt that Warrior and Hogan were on the same level, whereas Savage and Hogan, even when Savage was champion for that 1 year, it was still Hogan's ball game. It was still Hogan's playground.
I think that was intentional because the end game there was always Hogan Savage,
right?
And I think that may have been booking intentional. I think the reason the Warrior probably felt more important is because he really, in Vince's eyes, was the next thing. A lot of people don't realize that even during the height of Hulkamania, Vince was already looking forward. There's a match on the Peacock, and I don't exactly know how to phrase it. It's what they call one of those lost gems.
Right.
It was a guy who wrestled Bret the Hitman Hart.
I remember that one.
The story behind this guy is it was the best match he'd ever had, and Vince was eyeing that guy to be Hogan's successor. Okay, they talk about it in this match. Or in the commentary leading into the match before the match starts, Vince was already eyeing this guy because he was already looking for the next guy, even at the height of Hulkamania. It's like, okay, this guy's not going to last forever. I'm thinking Vince, regardless of what people think about Vince, he relies too heavily on legends. He has always looked at that company 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. So he was looking past Hulk Hogan and Hulkamania for the next big thing. And when this guy ended up, obviously, when you're in there with Bret Hart, you could be the shittiest worker on the planet. Bret Hart's going to make you look like $1 million, and that's what happened here.
Yeah.
And then that guy, eventually, they realized he ain't worth shit, and he was gone. So Vince was looking for the successor to Hulkamania. I don't think he saw that in Savage. I think he saw that in the Warrior, and I think that's why, presentation-wise, the Warrior felt more important during his feud with Hogan than Savage always felt lesser than.
Hence why the letdown of the Warrior is a lot more noticeable.
Exactly. And I think the Warrior was always going to be that guy. The money is in the chase. Once he got there, now what?
Well, I think in him, he wasn't good enough. He wasn't a good enough performer.
Well, there's that too.
And I think that's what I think what it was. He wasn't as he was propped up. Hogan and Savage. He was propped up. He had the feud with Rude, and Rick Rude gave him his best matches. That was that was the first time Warrior looked like a legit wrestler.
That's
when he was
easily his best feud he's ever had in a company. Easily his best feud.
Yeah, and so he was in there with people who made him look good, and they propped him up, and I think he was a paper tiger, and once he had to be world champion, it just kind of exposed him, and so I think that's just what it was.
One day we'll do a deep dive on that seriously. I'm very fascinated about why Warrior didn't work. because Warrior was red hot in 1990, red hot.
Absolutely, I agree. And I was a huge Warrior fan. Like I at one point was more Warrior than Hogan. I was Team Warrior in that match.
Oh no,
me
not
too.
Me.
Yeah.
Oh no, not me. I was Hulkamania. Hogan the Hulk. Well, to this day.
Yeah, we can save that for another night.
Definitely, we'll definitely do that as a what if or some kind of thing. Anyway, guys, thank you. So, Rob, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, we can do that because I was going to say just Warrior looked less than in contrast to Hogan, but then also, on the other side of the street, Warrior's former partner was world champion at the same time, and he looked better than Warrior too. Yeah, so Warrior just looked less than compared to two different people, and I think he just kind of got exposed through all of that.
And also too, I think also too, another combination did, and that's much his fault, but the business has started to come down a little bit now at that point. In 1990.
Oh, and that's the other thing. That was not his fault. The business was starting to drop off everywhere.
Yeah,